So here is the first of a couple of upcoming audio videos. This is the one that I promised to put up after the last week's class. I finally determined that my computer's microphone has a problem apparently, or the microphone port. So I'm using another laptop, and this one I had to get the appropriate software to do this, so I apologize. And thank you for being patient. So what we're going to talk about briefly is how a web strategy fits into a company's overall information needs and how you can leverage your website to analyze customer information or product information and ultimately integrate that into your overall. So there are 7 design elements to a website, and those include context, content, community, customization, communication, connection, and commerce. Let's just briefly go through what each. So your website should have a fit the context of your business or your service or operation. If it's a college site uh, like MHCC or EOU, it should have a feel of that kind of business. If it is a website that reflects or represents a business that deals in farm equipment or used farm equipment, then it should have a feel that fits that kind of a business. Your context really is the personality of your website as it reflects to what the product or service actual orientation. Content literally is all the digital subject matter that's on the site, and again, it should complement context. So uh, you could have a farm equipment site that has a place for weather because that is actually a fairly good complement. And you could have live feeds on the prices of different kinds of products, farm products like wheat and cattle sales and stuff like that, if, again, that's a fit. Community is the extent to which users of that site can be brought together to a common purpose or interaction. Customization. Customization is the extent to which your website and your overall service can produce products with unique features as defined by the customer that the site serves. I think I've talked in class about Dell, and they were the first computer manufacturer that used the internet to produce customized products for individual users. I'm sorry. Communication. The internet was founded by the military to make sure, in case of a nuclear attack, that military bases could remain in contact with one another if communication lines, which in the 60s when it was first set up, consisted almost exclusively of telephone lines. So if there was a nuclear attack in an area, that because telephone lines were ubiquitous in all directions, that they could be utilized for different bases to remain in contact. They also assured contact between military operations and universities that were doing military um, research. And so in the late 60s, early 70s, it became the venue, the primary venue through which many universities exchanged information and communicated, like email for one, but also the exchange of different kinds. And in that respect, it is a good means of connection between, again, um, different sites. And if you are, let's go back to a farm equipment uh, manufacturer, it might have sites on there. So the web can provide appropriate connections to other sites. So again, uh, one connection with used uh, equipment might be to mechanics, let's say, that might. And then finally, commerce. If you're selling new or used farm equipment, most sites do, in fact, when they represent a business, the primary intent, at least in the minds of the operators of the business, want to encourage commerce, either directly or indirectly. But if you're going to do it directly, in other words, sell stuff over the site, one of the things that you have to make sure that you can do is provide the service that's necessary for such an operation, and that requires a lot of people and webmasters and all kinds of talent that often smaller businesses don't think about. It's pretty hard to do commerce on site but not provide 24/7 uh, complimentary service in your. Real quickly, a the communication aspect, well, the communication and exchange of information aspect of a internet site or a website is set up uh, in this diagram. You have three primary components: your computers or desktops, a server that is either within your operation often or through your internet provider, and a router. And the router is what connects to disparate systems. And so if your internet service provider is Comcast, uh, when you send something out or receive it, let's say you send it out, it's just a reverse if you're receiving it. So if you're sending out a message, let's say an email to somebody who's in the EOU realm and they have their own server, it'll go out through your provider servers and then routed to the uh, the operation that you want to send the message to. And again, if you just reverse that, it's how you receive information. And so when you have an email, it's read just like a zip code, only in reverse. And so let's say you want to say you're at a particular location, and your location might be an educational, government, organizational, commerce, whatever uh, email address, and you want to send an email to the University of Oregon. So a ping goes out when you hit send from your computer, and it goes out through your server, and it's routed to all addresses that end in edu. And then when it finds them, it goes to the next level. Is this the University of Oregon? Which would be uoregon.edu. So again, it's reading it right to left. So it finds all the EDUs, and then it says, is this the U Oregon? Yes, it is. And then it will go one step further to the left and send it to the address in front of that, which is typically your name. And a networked organization is just a, a complex system of all those hardwares that are interconnected with one another and exchanging information. And so your accounting system is probably connected in a larger operation to the warehouse, which is connected in turn perhaps to the trucks that are delivering these things, and they're all exchanging information simultaneously. And an extranet is a system usually for, it could be a business, but it's usually a collection of businesses that do business with one another. And so uh, your if you're Bank of America, let's say, within your internet, within your complex, your computers are hooked together uh, desk to desk, floor to floor. That would be an intranet. And then it's not necessarily hooked to the internet, but you can have particular hardware pieces that do connect to the internet so that your system or you as an individual user can go out and talk to others. But let's go back and say you're Bank of America, and one of your clients might be Boeing, or it might be an insurance company, and you you're all interconnected so that when Boeing wants to pay its employees, it may well have a relationship set up with uh, Bank of America so that they, in fact, issue the checks. And you have all kinds of all kinds of payments, perhaps going out to distributors on top of that. You're paying suppliers, you're paying um, people that you do business with, all simultaneously while you're collecting revenues. Uh, in the case of Bank of America, you're collecting revenues, let's say, from Boeing. And again, they're just all interconnected through the hardware that you need for such a thing. We talked about servers, routers, the desktops. A server is nothing more, I think I said in class, than a big desktop. It just has more memory. Um, a firewall is something to screen incoming information into your system. If you think about it, going back to the diagram in your head, you could put a firewall in front of a router. You could put a firewall between the router and the server. You can put them in the server. You can put them between the router. I'm sorry, between the server and the desktop. You can put them in the desktop. Uh, Sometimes it's a physical piece of equipment, and sometimes it's a piece of software. But the point in all situations is generally to act as a filter so that you can screen information coming in, things like bugs and spiders and um, things that. So before you set up this site, if you think back on the little bit that we've covered, before you set up your system, you want to have a very clear idea on what you want this system to accomplish. Going back to the 7 design features, is this just to share information internally like an intranet, or are you going to connect to the outside? Do you want to do commerce? If you do, you need to probably take orders online. That has to be hooked up to a distribution system of some kind, because most products have, if they're not digitized, have to be delivered uh, overland as opposed to digitized items like software, music, and print, which can be delivered over the net itself. So you want to know, again, all the functions of the site, because that defines not only the needs you're trying to meet for your customer, but also it defines the hardware. And so you want to go through a system where you can list your business objectives, define the system hardware, the functionality that you're going to need to actualize those objectives. And then you should define as well the information that that you're trying to generate, that you will need. So if you or need to create. So if you just want to display your goods, like you want this, as many do, to act as a catalog of your displayed goods, you have to, the system functionality, all that's going to be digitized. How do you want it actually portrayed? Well, you want dynamic text, but you also may want graphics that can be viewed, zoom in, zoom out. I mean, all those different. In website design, I was going to talk about this in class, and it's hard to go through, so I'll simply say there are different kinds of complexity in the design that you want to think through, whether it's just sort of a simple flat architecture where there's a half a dozen or so functions, or if you have to go deep into any one of those sections to get more information or more detail, and the extent to which those are cross-connected themselves. So you want to know something about hierarchical architecture, and this is actually a pretty decent video, and wherever you see a video, you're obligated to watch it for the purpose of the class and your quiz. So if you can't access it through this audio, you can access it through the non-audio version that I've already posted. You just have to go find it and watch. You want to be concerned when you lay out your features that this site is very user-friendly. It's easy to use, it's easy to access, and it's not confusing. If you're going to do e-commerce, you want to think about the capability to do online transactions. I talked about that, and that if and when you're going to do that, that you need to concern yourselves with security, how accessible, it goes back to things like firewalls, but how accessible your site is from an everyday user, or if you have to make certain information secure, like information around the purchases, that it's not easily hackable. It seems like almost everything is hackable, so how simple it is, because at the end of the day, that is where trust is developed with your users. So again, here's a video that you may want to watch. One of the things you want to make sure you understand from the bit that's discussed in your text is this issue of search engine optimization. And search engine optimization uses strategies to increase your quantity and quality of the traffic into your site. And the whole purpose is to improve the likelihood that a customer will find your site when they're searching for a particular issue. The fact is that 62% of search engine users don't look beyond the first page of a result. So you want to make sure that, one, you're on that first page near the top, and that once they enter your site, there's a fit, as I talked about earlier, between the context is right, the content is appropriate, the connections are appropriate, so on and so on. Something that we're concerned about is the click-through rate, which is how deep somebody goes into your site. Again, it should be user-friendly, and it should be intuitive for a user. And again, good video on target. Crowdsourcing is something more and more that businesses are concerned with. So one of the applications of crowdsourcing is fundraising. It's used in that context, but the context that it's used in this particular presentation refers to its facilitation of interaction and conversation and participation and collaboration between different end users. That's one of the values of the internet, and crowdsourcing really describes how tasks can be delegated to large sort of diffuse groups or communities who often volunteer their contributions. And it involves and depends on engaging people in tasks that they find interesting or rewarding. So again, here's a good video on crowdsourcing that talks. And finally, we talked about most of these things that we had identified at the beginning, and I didn't talk about Web 2.0 or where the web is going in terms of how some people see its ultimate applications. And one of those ultimate developments and applications involves the IoT, or Internet of Things. So I would strongly encourage you to watch these videos. I'm going to have to construct a second quiz, and so I will make sure questions come out of them, so be sure you watch them.